I'll never forget how her hands shook. We were at Gate C12 at Chicago Midway Airport. My Agnes held the envelope like it was the most important thing in the world. But it wasn't. It was empty. "Tessa," she said softly, her voice trembling, "there's no ticket." Then my dad turned away, like she didn't even exist. Like the $20,000 she sent him last month for this big family trip didn't matter at all. That was Thanksgiving 2014. They flew off to Rome, and I stayed behind. I was 24, just finished with nursing school in Milwaukee. And Agnes was the only person who ever made me feel safe and loved. She wasn't rich or fancy. She was just a retired librarian from Cedar Falls, Iowa. She wore cozy cardigans with birds stitched on them and made the best peach pie ever. Every summer, when my mom and dad went on vacation to the Hamptons, I stayed at her old farmhouse. We played Scrabble, drank sweet tea, and fell asleep listening to her old records. She saved everything I ever gave her. My stick figure drawings, messy Mother's Day cards, even the napkin I wrote on when I passed my nursing boards. When my parents came back from Europe 3 weeks later, walking through the airport looking cool in leather jackets and expensive cologne, they stopped when they saw me. I had a lawyer from Des Moines with me, and a folder full of papers, messages, and notarized statements. This isn't just a story about a grandma being forgotten. It's about love, trust, and what happens when someone kind finally stands up for herself. They thought Agnes wouldn't fight. They forgot who raised me. I wanted to believe my parents wouldn't hurt her. But I was wrong. That Thanksgiving, when they came to her little house in Cedar Falls with suitcases and smiles and talked about a special trip to Europe, I wanted to believe them. But in my family, love always had hidden strings. Agnes didn't see the strings until they tightened. At first, it felt like a happy scene from a storybook. There was wine in fancy glasses, her apple pie on the stove, the table glowing in soft light. She had made her sweet potato casserole with toasted pecans. The house smelled like cinnamon and turkey. But the laughter felt fake. Too loud, too perfect. I knew that laugh. Dad used it to make deals at work. He ate his food and said, "This family needs an adventure. Rome, Paris, London together." Agnes blinked, surprised. "That sounds nice, but my knees." "No problem," he said quickly. "We'll take it slow. Private rooms, wheelchairs, even a travel nurse if needed." Mom said, "You've never been out of the country, Agnes. It's time." Even my cousins, Isla and Lucas, who were glued to their phones, said yes without really caring. Then Dad added, like it was nothing, "We just need a little more money to lock it in. Deposits are due next week." "How much is a little?" I asked quietly. He grinned. 20,000. I thought maybe Mom would pay. She always wanted this trip. The room went silent. Then Agnes nodded faintly. "Well, if it brings everyone together," she said, and called the bank the next morning. I was in the hallway, fists tight. "Are you sure?" I asked. She smiled softly. "Honey, they're finally seeing me again. It's worth every penny," she said. Every part of me wanted to stop her. But the way Dad hugged her goodbye was so fast and distracted, it made my chest hurt. This wasn't a gift. It was a deal. And Agnes didn't realize she was the one being tricked. The morning of the flight, she was ready first. She wore her navy cardigan with gold buttons and her black flats. The ones she always called her travel shoes, even though she hadn't used them in 20 years. Her suitcase was tiny, just for a weekend, not a 3-week Europe trip. "I packed light," she said, smiling. "I won't slow anyone down." I forced a smile, but inside I was falling apart at O'Hare. Everything went too fast. Dad barked orders like a drill sergeant. Mom fussed over snacks and seat upgrades. No one really talked to Agnes. I walked beside her, wheeling her suitcase. She looked around like a child seeing the ocean for the first time. "I've never been to an airport this big," she whispered, holding my arm. At the check-in counter, it started. Dad's voice became sharp. "Not on the list. Must be a system error." I stepped forward. "What's happening?" Dad smiled too tightly. "Looks like Agnes's ticket didn't go through. Website glitch. Nothing we can do now." Mom shrugged. "Maybe it's better, Agnes. All that walking." "But I paid. I gave you the money," Agnes said. Dad smiled fake and said, "Thanks to you, we're all going. You should rest. We'll bring souvenirs." Then he just turned and walked to the gate. No hug. No goodbye. Just silence. I froze. My heart beat fast. Families around us hugged, took pictures, laughed, and we just stood there. Me, Agnes, and her tiny suitcase. "There's no ticket for me," she whispered again, like saying it might make it untrue. I reached for her hand. "Then I'm not going either." She shook her head. Tessa, you've dreamed about this. Not like this. Not without you. And just like that, they boarded the plane. We turned and walked back into the cold November wind. The drive home was quiet. Agnes sat straight in the passenger seat, hands folded, no tears, no anger, just stillness, like she was watching someone else's life. Back at her house, she went to her window chair, unpacked her suitcase slowly. Folded sweaters, a bottle of lavender lotion, a brand new passport that would never get stamped. I didn't know if I should say anything, so I made her chamomile tea. She held an old photo of herself, my dad, and Aunt Celeste at Myrtle Beach in the 1980s. The colors were faded, but her smile was bright. I really thought maybe this time they meant it, she whispered. I couldn't answer. My throat was too tight with anger. That night, I sat at her table and searched online. Elder Financial Abuse Laws Idaho. Coercion, deception, inheritance rights, financial exploitation. I wrote down a number. The next morning, Agnes was already in her garden, pruning her rose bushes with her knit gloves. I brought her coffee. You don't have to pretend you're okay, I said quietly. She looked up and smiled faintly. I'm not pretending, sweetie. I just don't want to make it harder for you. It's already hard, I admitted. But doing nothing is harder, she said, looking at the rose petals in her hand. They're still my children. I know, I whispered. But you're my family, and I won't let him do this to you. She didn't reply. That night, I called the number I wrote down. A receptionist connected me to Miles Carter, a lawyer with the Office of Elder Protection in Boise. Tell me everything, he said, calm. So I did. For the first time in days, I didn't feel helpless. Miles wasn't what I expected. The next afternoon, he arrived wearing a gray blazer and jeans. He shook Agnes's hand gently and sat on the edge of her armchair like a visitor, not an investigator. Mrs. Mabel, he began, Tessa told me what happened. I know this is hard, but what they did might also be illegal. Agnes held her teacup. I don't want trouble. They're my family. I understand, Miles said. But I'm here to protect you. Taking $20,000 from you and leaving you behind is elder financial exploitation. That's a kind of theft. Her eyes flickered with shame and doubt. I said, they didn't earn that money, Grandma. They took it. That's not love. That's stealing. Miles nodded. Exactly. And you don't have to be afraid. We can make this right. Agnes squeezed my hand, looking at me like I was her brave little girl again. Tessa, I don't want to make waves, she whispered. You don't have to, I said. I'll do it for both of us. Over the next few days, Miles helped us collect all the papers, messages, and proof we could. There were bank statements, emails, text messages, and notes Agnes had written. Every small thing mattered. Agnes didn't complain. She just quietly folded clothes, watered her plants, and sometimes hummed an old song while we worked. But I could see her sadness in the corners of her eyes. She had loved my parents, trusted them, and they had betrayed her. We filed a report, and soon the lawyers contacted my parents. Dad was shocked. Mom seemed nervous. They couldn't pretend it was just a misunderstanding anymore. Agnes stayed calm. She didn't yell or cry. She just sat in her chair and smiled faintly. They're still my children, she said. But I knew inside she felt hurt. Deeply. The lawyers explained the laws to my parents. They told them that taking money from an older adult by tricking or forcing them was illegal. They had to return the money, and they might face consequences if they didn't. Agnes looked at me and whispered, You saved me, Tessa. You stood up for me. I smiled, tears in my eyes. You saved me too, Agnes. You taught me to be brave. In the end, Agnes got her money back. My parents had to apologize officially. They never went on a family trip without her again, and they didn't try to trick her. Agnes smiled more after that. She felt respected, safe, and loved the way she should have been all along. Every summer, I still visit her old farmhouse. We play Scrabble, drink sweet tea, and fall asleep to her old records. Her peach pie still tastes like summer sunshine. And every time I look at her, I remember that love is not just about giving gifts or trips. It's about kindness, respect, and never letting anyone take advantage of someone you love. Agnes taught me that even the kindest hearts can fight when it matters most. And she taught me that standing up for someone you love is the most important thing in the world. Even now, I think about that day at the airport. I remember her shaking hands, her soft voice, the tiny suitcase, and the cold November wind. But I also remember the strength in her eyes when she trusted me to help her. That was the moment I knew I would always protect her, no matter what. And Agnes? She just smiled, trimmed her roses, baked her pies, and reminded me every day that love is not something you take. Love is something you protect. Miles leaned forward. If you say it's okay, we can try to get your money back and keep you safe. We'll need your bank papers, messages, and anything else that can help us. She hesitated, her hands twisted in her lap. Then finally she nodded slowly. If Tessa thinks this is right, I trust her, she said softly. That was all we needed. At her bank, the manager, Brenda Kim, printed out the transfer papers, $20,000, to my dad's account. The numbers looked big on the page, but they were right where they should be, safe and secure. At the airport, the check-in worker, Holly Bennett, looked at her closely. I remember you, she said quietly. She looked a little lost and unsure. That small moment felt strange, like time had slowed down. Her son told the airline worker that flying might be too hard for Agnes because of her health. The airline workers told her politely to go home. No explanation, no apology, just strict rules that felt mean. Holly Bennett agreed to write a statement about what happened. Every new piece of information, every paper or message, made it harder to breathe because it reminded us how unfair things had been, but at the same time, it made it easier to act. We were finally doing something. Back at Agnes's little house, I helped Miles scan papers and documents on the old, humming scanner while Agnes made us grilled cheese sandwiches in her tiny kitchen. She moved around slowly, pretending everything was normal, humming a little tune. But I could see something had changed in her. She didn't get worried or scared when Miles used big words like civil case or inheritance revocation. While slicing tomatoes for sandwiches, she even muttered, Maybe it's time they realized I'm not just a wallet in a rocking chair. Miles smiled. I'd say you're a very strong woman, Mrs. Wetmore. She blushed and laughed quietly like a teenager. The warmth in her eyes made me feel safe. A few days later, Miles looked up from his laptop. Tessa, he said calmly, we're ready. Ready for what? I asked. He closed his folder slowly, looking at Agnes. For when they come back. 3 weeks later, they did come back. I knew the flight number because Elia had found it in the travel papers from the travel agency. They had paid using Agnes's money, even though they didn't deserve it. I didn't tell Agnes I was going to the airport. She was outside pruning her roses on the porch when I left. I said I had errands. She smiled and handed me a grocery list. Her calm face made it easy to pretend everything was normal. At Boise International Airport, I waited by the arrivals gate. Miles stood next to me, wearing a neat gray suit. He looked calm and serious. In his hand, he held a manila folder with all the important papers inside. Bank statements, Holly's written statement, and a court order about financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. There was also a request to stop any inheritance until things were sorted out. Then I saw them. Dad rolled 2 big suitcases covered with travel stickers from all over the world. Mom followed, looking perfect, smiling like nothing had happened. Aunt Celeste posed with Isla and Lucas, waving and laughing. They were glowing with happiness until they saw me. Their smiles froze. Miles stepped forward. Victor, Mabel, Celeste, Brooks, these are for you, he said, handing them the papers. They stared at the papers as if they were written in another language. Their faces showed confusion and panic. What is this? Dad stammered, his voice shaking a little. Miles stayed calm. Legal notice. You are being investigated for taking money from Agnes, Mabel. You must respond within 7 business days. If you don't, there may be a court case. Aunt Celeste yanked off her sunglasses. Are you serious? We gave that money. Miles raised an eyebrow. You didn't really give it. You tricked her. That is fraud, not generosity. Dad's eyes narrowed. Tessa, you did this, he said, his voice angry. I nodded. No, I'm not punishing anyone. I'm protecting my family. Mom snapped at me. You made her believe she was wanted, then left her at the gate like she didn't matter. She's old. That trip would have been too hard for her, but not for her money, I said firmly. Silence. Aunt Celeste scoffed. You've always been dramatic. Miles stepped forward again. This conversation is over. You'll hear from us in mediation, he said firmly. We walked away. I looked back once. There was no glamour, no excitement, just panic in their faces. They skipped the first mediation meeting. Miles shrugged. People like that think ignoring us will make us stop, but it didn't. We were determined. The judge decided by default. Full repayment of $20,000 within 30 days. But it didn't end there. The court saw the deception and emotional harm, so it temporarily froze all inheritance claims. Later, the court formally recommended that Victor, Celeste, and their spouses lose their inheritance rights. When I brought the ruling home, Agnes sat quietly at the table, flipping through the pages. They really did this, she said softly. Not with disbelief, just with quiet recognition. I'm sorry it had to go this far, I whispered. She smiled a small, sad smile. No, sweetheart. I'm sorry I let it go on so long. That night, she called Mr. Hendricks, her old estate lawyer. I want to change my will. Remove Victor and Celeste completely. No money for them. Later, we sat on the porch with Machi warming our hands in the evening sun. I'm not doing this to punish them, Tessa, she said. I just want peace. And peace means not giving people more chances to hurt you. I nodded slowly. I understood. In the next few weeks, I helped Agnes close the old joint bank account she had shared with my dad. We moved her savings into a protected trust, so no one could take it. She made me her financial helper. I want you to take care of things if I can't, she said, her hand warm on mine. You always can, I whispered back. But deep down I knew something had changed. It wasn't just the hurt from betrayal, but years of hoping and waiting had finally turned into clarity. Not anger, just peace. We returned to our usual routines. Gardening, grocery shopping, too many cookies. But something new also started. Agnes began drawing again, little birds, hills, and flowers. I signed us up for a watercolor class at the community center. She complained at first, but she came anyway. It's never too late to start over, she said one morning with a brush in her hand. And it wasn't. We really had started over. There was no waiting for apologies that wouldn't come. Only the truth. Only presence. Only kindness. That spring, I planted yellow tulips along the fence. When I was 8, she had told me yellow tulips meant hope. Not joy, but hope. By May, the yard was golden. She stood on the porch, coffee in hand, staring out at the flowers and the sky. I figured you needed something to look forward to, I said. She squeezed my hand. I already do, honey. You. That summer, I applied to Idaho State's master's program in elder advocacy. I wanted to help people like her. People whose stories never reached the courts or care centers. When I told Agnes, she teared up. I always knew you'd help people, she whispered. I just didn't think you'd start with me. I smiled. You taught me how life moves forward, not without shadows, but with gentler light. Agnes made friends in her painting class. She sold a few watercolors at the town craft fair. One painting was called Gate C12. She never explained why, but I knew sometimes letters came from my parents or Aunt Celeste. We never opened them. Agnes just put them in a drawer marked unanswered, and sipped her tea quietly. 2 years later, one October morning, she sat by the window in her favorite quilt. I'm slowing down, she murmured. But the tulips will come back next spring, won't they? They always do, I said. She passed away peacefully 2 weeks later. We buried her on a hill near the lake under an old oak tree. I laid yellow tulips at her grave. At the funeral, neighbors came. Her art teacher, Desmond, and even Holly sent flowers. The card said she mattered. She did. She still does. Now I work in elder justice. I keep the tulips blooming and her legacy alive. Every time I see yellow tulips, I remember Agnes's hope, her courage, and how she taught me to protect others and keep kindness alive. Even though she's gone, the lessons she taught me stay in my heart, guiding me every day. And I know that when I plant tulips, when I help others, her spirit is with me, smiling quietly, proud of the work we are doing together.